Well, hello again on this fine end of summer day. The season is not at an end, but all the events are coming to a close. And kids are going to be heading back to school soon. And actually, I guess depending on where you are, some of your kids may have already gone back. But anyway, thought this would be a apt time to talk about this Massachusetts abortion bill that was just signed into law, but wanted to start out with a description here of the cult of Molech. And some of you know why already. Some of you, this will be an education. But this is from EBSCO, which is a trusted source in academia for research. And so it's not speaking out of turn. It's pretty, I guess, secularly considered legitimate organization. And so this is what they say about Molech worship. The ancient Semitic peoples who worshiped Molech believed in a number of deities considered pagan by monotheistic religions. Molech was a central figure in fertility rites that involved both human procreation and the ritual sacrifice of children. A specific cult of Molech was based in Topheth in the Hinnom Valley southwest of Jerusalem. Topheth meaning place of fire, also derived from Toph, a root meaning playing a percussive instrument like a tambourine or a drum. Ceremonial rites included drumming, which may have been used to drown out the screams of the burning children. Worshippers also played flutes and chanted. Some scholars believe that practicing the ceremonial rites put worshippers in a trance, which might have helped parents distance themselves from their emotions so they could willingly offer up their children. Accounts describing these rites alternate the word children with the words offspring and seed, highlighting the purpose of the rituals. The belief that these sacrificial offerings would induce Molech to grant fertility and abundance for people and their crops. And so now, with that as a background on Molech worship, thought we would take a look here at this news story. So this is from Massachusetts.gov, mass.gov, and it is their press release talking about the signing of this legislation. And so this is partway through the entire press release, but it kind of summarizes it well, everything that's talked about. Just a few points that I noted in reading the whole article or the whole press release, was that it's veiled as protecting pro-life folks, and we'll see that here in just a second. People are talked about being forced to leave Massachusetts for care prior to this legislation being passed. And what that really means is they have chosen to leave for abortion. And so this is presented as if it is a last-minute circumstance where, like, mom is in getting ready to go into labor, and the doctors realize that there's something horribly wrong, and the doctors just can't do anything about it because the former laws tied their hands, which we'll look at the legislation and what was on the books as of 2024 and 2025, and see that there was already a lot of leeway in what doctors could do in terms of aborting children. So it's actually all late term. This is not as if it extends something just a little bit. Late term abortion, I think, is defined as over 40 weeks, but this is actually third trimester. So this is dealing with pregnancies that are at the 24-week and more mark. And then there's some other wordplay here where reproductive health care is talked about, but it's really just abortion. This is focused on abortion. The legislation says abortion. It's not reproductive health care as if it's the life of the mom, the life of the baby, safe pregnancy. It's all just straight up abortion, and they use this other language to veil it. And the other thing that's noted that I don't want to forget to mention is that one of the outcomes of the legislation is that previously this pertained to doctors in hospitals, and now it pertains to doctors in pretty much any facility. So there's no regulation. These abortions don't have to happen in regulated facilities anymore. So an abortion provider, somebody who just does abortion, like Planned Parenthood, who effectively, 95 to 100% of what most of these Planned Parenthood facilities do is just abortion on demand. And their facilities don't have to meet the same stringent requirements for health codes and procedures and record keeping and the the credentials of the staff as hospitals do. And so this removes any kind of requirement to have any kind of standards of care for any of the women who are undergoing abortion. And then there's also this language, which is very general language, and we'll talk about some of the other general language that's in this article and in the legislation, but it talks about other complex medical circumstances. So it's the life of the mom, it's the mental health of the mom, but also other complex medical circumstances. So that is basically just a catch-all for whatever they want to say is the extenuating circumstance, is justification for aborting this fully formed human being who happens to be in the womb. So just reading a little bit from this article, here's something from Secretary Kiame Mahanaya, and as a physician, I know nothing should get between a patient, a doctor, and a healthcare decision. So there's that healthcare decision, that's abortion. So patients and doctors, if the two agree that they want an abortion, then the abortion is going to happen. And even the baby, I guess, shouldn't get in between their decision. In signing this bill into law, Governor Haley is making sure that those decisions get made where they belong, in a physician's office. Now, not in a hospital, but that's just a catch-all for anywhere where somebody with an MD, including those who got an MD under strange circumstances, doubtful circumstances, where if they have an office at all, they can do an abortion. I'm grateful for her continued leadership and for protecting reproductive health, that's abortion, and reproductive health care and abortion access for the people of Massachusetts. So I'm glad, says this Secretary Mahanaya, that we can kill our babies and we can do it all the way up until the moment of birth. Now, I noticed a few things on Facebook where people were putting posts when this happened that it was signed into law, that it's not that a bunch of people were getting these third trimester abortions, but it protects people who need them for medically necessary decisions, and that the other claim is that people no longer use abortion as birth control like they used to. But in fact, in my experience, which is within the past decade, and talking to pro-life pregnancy center directors and things like that now, women do still use abortion as birth control. They do find out they're pregnant. They thought they were on the pill. They thought they were on birth control. They're surprised that they were able to conceive for whatever reason. And they do come in and they do use it as quote unquote birth control. And what is birth control? Birth control always comes down to the fact that you're not controlling whether or not you get pregnant, because birth control pills are abortifacients as well. But it includes and is largely based on, I got a fly on the screen here. Largely based on women who are I'm going to have to edit this out. This is nuts. Women who are pregnant and now they want to have an abortion. And what does the abortion do? It controls whether or not that baby is born. That living child in the womb is born. So that's all birth control can be, is controlling whether or not the baby gets to continue to live. Not begin to live, but continue to live. The only effective birth control that would work by their definition would be don't have sex. So that's birth control. Whether or not you want a baby to be born is only ultimately controlled by whether or not you actually have sex. All right, continuing on. The legislation so this is a good summary paragraph. The legislation updates Massachusetts abortion law by allowing physicians to rely on their professional medical judgment consistent with accepted standards of care when providing abortion care later in pregnancy. So later in pregnancy, they're just saying once the baby's fully formed in the womb up to the point of birth, then they can kill the baby, and that's it. And then accepted standards of care. Accepted by who? This is all, the vagueness of all of this language is what they want. They want abortion on demand for any reason with no recourse whatsoever. The law is intended to ensure that patients facing devastating fetal diagnoses, okay, so what is that? What is that? We're going to look at a case where somebody got a devastating fetal diagnosis and their baby is celebrated for turning around and coming back and just being alive, because they permitted their child to be alive and be born. And as devastating as the diagnosis is not a death sentence. The diagnosis is seeing what the problems are, and in that case, then the baby is a patient who can be treated. Let's see, serious pregnancy complications or quote unquote other complex medical circumstances that these people can receive timely care without unnecessary legal uncertainty. Yeah, we'd hate for murder to be stopped by legal uncertainty. All right, patients affected by this are often experiencing deeply wanted pregnancies that have suddenly become medically complex. All right, so this is the language where the propaganda is trying to get you to believe that there's a bunch of pro-life people that are for this legislation where babies can be murdered up to and including at the time of labor. So they're saying, no, 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 no. All you people who would have a gut reaction against this, this is actually for you. You should agree with us because this is all based on people that just love their children, and it's heart-wrenching that they would have to go through this. And it is heart-wrenching when people have to go through these sorts of things, but this legislation does not deal with keeping the baby safe and keeping mom safe and making sure doctors provide a high quality of care for both patients. This legislation is simply to permit abortion on demand for any reason at any time during the pregnancy. All right, so let's see. Let's keep going here. Patients affected by this are often experiencing deeply wanted pregnancies. There are families who have prepared to welcome a child only to receive heartbreaking news. So this is all emotionally charged language. Continuing the pregnancy would pose serious medical risks. Okay, aborting, killing a baby is a serious medical risk. Under prior law, some Massachusetts patients were forced to leave the state to receive care. No, they were not. They chose to leave the state to have an abortion, separating them from their doctors, support systems, and loved ones while navigating one of the most painful experiences imaginable. Well, that's true. It is one of the most painful experiences imaginable. And I'm glad that they're honest about that, because I personally counseled a lot of post-abortive families that they will say how horrifying it was to look back and know that they killed their child in the womb. And I won't get into it in this video, but YouTube probably wouldn't let it stay up. But abortion, the process of abortion, is one of the most grotesque processes, even in the first trimester. Even using the pill is a horrendous experience. And the older the child gets in the womb, the more egregious and inhuman the process becomes. Let's see. We got some more quotes here. Let's see. Yeah, this is a good paragraph right here. Under the previous law, physicians were required to determine whether a patient's circumstances met a narrow list of statutory exceptions before providing abortion care later in pregnancy. Now, when we look at the previous legislation compared to the new legislation, you'll see that this is not a narrow list of exceptions. There are not things that would inhibit any doctor from performing an abortion anyway. What this does is it just explodes everything to where there's no review, there's no oversight, there's no limitations, there's no quality control on the facility or on the ability of the doctors. And one of the other things that people don't often think about is that there's no liability to the doctor. One of the first things that a patient will do, patient, quote unquote, a victim or a co-conspirator to murder will do, is they will sign a full release where if they have any kind of repercussions, physical, mental, otherwise, any harm that's done to them that they realize after the fact, there is no room to go back after these doctors to litigate for negligence or anything like that. There have been women who have almost died, many, huge percentages of women that have complications post-abortion, and when they try to go back to the abortionist to get care, the abortionist sends them to the emergency room and says, you're on your own. And so this is not caring, this is not loving, this is not between a doctor and their patient and an intimate, heart-wrenching thing. This is very impersonal, it's very cash-driven, profit-driven, and this is the state probably getting a lot of kickbacks and a lot of money from Planned Parenthood and other pro-abortion organizations to make this happen. So, let's see. Anything else here? This law ensures access to care by empowering physicians. Where are we at? This law ensures access to care by empowering physicians to use their professional judgment to make decisions in the best interest of their patients. That's funny. That S, that does not include babies. That is not the best interest of the baby to be killed. And we'll talk, if I don't run too long in the interim, but we'll talk a little bit about all the instances, like any reason that somebody would have to have an abortion would fall under 4 basic categories. And that's, you can remember by the acronym SLED. The first time I heard this was from a guy named Scott Klusendorf. He was distilling things down, I believe, from other sources, but SLED stands for size, level of dependence, environment, or level of development. So size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So all of the reasons that somebody would ever give that an abortion is quote unquote medically necessary fall under those categories: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So when we're talking about these horrific diagnoses of anomalies, so the baby has something physically or mentally wrong, that would fall under degree of dependency as well. So it covers all of the bases. All right, so there's the article. This is actually the press release from mass.gov. This is the mass abortion bill, is what I'm going to call it. This is the mass abortion bill. Governor Maura Healey and Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll, Executive Office of Health and Human Services, for immediate release. And you can just see the glee on all of these women's faces that they're able. This one's staring off majestically into the distance. And, it's just, they have on lab coats, so you know they're legit. All right, well, let's look at a little bit of information here. So this has to do with babies that are 24 weeks and above in gestation. So they're growing. They've been growing for 24 weeks. Just as a frame of reference, a baby's heartbeat can be detected around the 5-week mark. And so this is way up in development. And you can see here, this is Cleveland Clinic. So this is, again, not some, pro-life advocacy thing. This is Cleveland Clinic. And at 24 weeks, it says the fetus, that's Latin for baby, the baby's lungs are fully developed but not well enough to work outside your uterus. Is that true? Well, let's look at this. Here's a picture. So 9 weeks, 12 weeks, 16, 20, 24 weeks. You see, here's what we're talking about. Now keep in mind the 20-week, small, but pretty much identical to the 24-week as far as this picture. Obviously, it's just an animation as far as this picture shows. But this baby is anatomically complete. This baby lacks exactly nothing to survive outside of the womb. And how do I know that? Well, we have stories like this. This is from Stead Family Children's Hospital, so Iowa healthcare system. An Iowa boy born at 21 weeks is now the world's most premature baby. Born at 133 days premature, so that's full term, from full term back. But at 21 weeks. So remember, we're talking about 24 weeks here. So this baby, in consideration of the legislation, is actually 3 weeks more developed than this baby that was born. Here's an image of the baby right after being born. Here's the image of the baby around, I think, 1 year old, thereabouts. But this is Nash, and the family had lost another baby about a year earlier at 18 weeks. And Nash made it to 21 weeks and was born premature. And this video is awesome, but I'll, for the sake of time. But McKinley Keene was the baby that was lost at 18 weeks. I love that the family named this child, and I love that they understand that even though that baby was premature to live outside of the womb, again, degree of dependency goes into this, doesn't make this any less of a person, and this beautiful McKinley will be in heaven waiting for her parents to get there. But it was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday when I started contracting really heavily. We rushed to Iowa City. We checked in. They got us a room, and not long after that, my water ended up breaking. This was a major setback, increasing the chance of complications for mom and baby. The care team sprang into action, trying to delay labor. Luckily, Keene says her contractions subsided for 2 days. Then on July 5th, just hours after she surpassed the 21-week mark, her motherly tuition kicked in once again. So here is the baby at 1 week old. So there's Nash, and you go, clump of cells? No. can't survive outside of the womb? No. I mean, here's a baby surviving outside of the womb with medical attention. Yeah, he's hooked up to all kinds of medical equipment, but imagine going into just a basic surgery without being hooked up to some kind of equipment. I mean, even to be put under anesthesia and then to be helped with your breathing. They monitor that, and to be given supplemental oxygen, things like that. People would die every day if they didn't have this sort of thing. This is not unwarranted. This is not out of the ordinary. This is not extraordinary. That word's going to come up again when we look at the legislation. This is just basic medical care. Now, it's intensive and it's specialized, but it's just basic procedures that everybody experiences when they go to the hospital for anything more than a regular checkup. Now, here is Nash during a regular follow-up visit. Look at how beautiful that young man is. And then here's the family. His parents went from not holding Nash until he was 26 days old to celebrating a happy, healthy 1-year-old. So 26 days. So that is 3.5 weeks past 21. 21, 22, 23, 24. So we are talking about 3.5 weeks beyond what Nash was when he was born and survived. And in this legislation, not only at 24 weeks, but beyond 24 weeks, these abortionists and these parents can kill these babies. So I just wanted to bring this into context, that we're not talking about abstract principles. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about babies. Imagine if the doctors had gotten a hold of this family and they had said that Nash is a high risk that will require an extraordinary level of care, and so you need to kill this baby in the womb. Now, this didn't happen with this family, but every child is a unique, individual, whole human being from the moment of conception. And so we don't have a right to kill any person, any human being, with the kind of selfishness that this abortion bill permits. All right, so let's see. What am I going to do next? I'm going to pull up the Massachusetts bill itself. Lest we think that I am speaking out of turn, we're going to see what the bill actually says. So, this is the bill itself. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the 194th General Court Act, an act prioritizing patient access to care. So, this is what's going to change in the law. And it's only 3 pages long. It's actually only 2 pages long. It's actually less than 2 pages long because there's the end of it. So we'll just read through it real quick. Section 1, Section 12N of Chapter 112 of the General Laws, as appearing in the 2024 official edition, is hereby amended by striking out in lines 1 to 9, inclusive, these words. So all of this is going to get struck out. No abortion may be performed except by a physician, and only if, in the best medical judgment of the physician, it is. So remember, the article said that this has to be between a parent and the doctor, and the state has no say in it. But this is already based on the previous bill that this is replacing, or that this is amending, already said that if it's in the best medical judgment of the doctor, then they can do an abortion. So here's what they called a narrowly defined set of parameters. Unless it is necessary to preserve the life of the patient, okay? So that's pretty broad. They can say, well, I diagnose you with high risk. I think your life would be in danger. Therefore, you should terminate this pregnancy. You should abort this child. That's all they have to say. That's in their medical opinion. It's based on the information, the diagnoses that's available at the time. That's all it would take. So it's already very broad. Necessary to preserve the patient's physical or mental health. So it's not just the life of the patient. In fact, let's broaden it out. Remember, this is what's being replaced. And this is how broadly it's written. Necessary to preserve the patient's physical or mental health. So let's say a mom has a history of postpartum depression, and late in the pregnancy, in the 3rd trimester, mom decides that she doesn't want to go through that again. And so because of her mental health, which may cause her to harm herself, then she needs to abort. So the doctor would be able to do that. All right. 3rd, warranted because of a lethal fetal anomaly or diagnosis. So it could be that the child is in the womb and has such a severe birth defect that the child is only alive because it's attached to the umbilical cord at the moment, and that at the moment that it's born, it doesn't have lungs, it doesn't have a brain at all, it's missing vital organs. So that would be a lethal fetal anomaly or diagnosis. How often do you think doctors diagnose wrongly? Now, we give them the benefit of the doubt, but they get diagnoses wrong all the time. And it's usually in a low-risk scenario where your life is not in danger. But let's say they misdiagnose this baby. Let's say that they see something, they misread an ultrasound, they misread some blood work, and they make a bad diagnosis. And based on that diagnosis, which is based on human error, they say, therefore, you should abort. It's not a lethal fetal anomaly that's proven. It's just a diagnosis of such. And so they don't even need to prove it. They just need to say that it was in my best judgment, in good faith at the time. And then we're going to see that there's not going to be any follow-up anyway. So it doesn't matter if they were wrong because there's no review. There's no quality control after the fact. And so they'll be able to keep on practicing. Or 4, warranted because of a grave fetal diagnosis that indicates the fetus is incompatible with sustained life outside of the uterus, except without extraordinary medical intervention. So what is extraordinary medical intervention? I don't know. Would we say that this is extraordinary medical intervention? Yeah, at this hospital, they had technology and they had expertise that allowed them to do what a lot of other hospitals cannot do. But they're saying that just because you have to try hard, you can kill this baby. So if you have to try hard, then you don't have to worry about this baby. You can abort. That is medical malpractice. Doctor, you have a doctor in court and the prosecution says, doctor, why did you let your patient just simply die? Well, it would have taken a lot of effort to try to save them. And forget about the Hippocratic Oath, that I won't do harm and that sort of thing. I just decided it was going to be too hard. So I just let him go. I pulled the plug. And that was, my diagnosis was that needed to happen. That was my good faith judgment. We wouldn't let that happen to somebody outside of the womb. Why would we let that happen to somebody inside of the womb? All right. And inserting in place. So all that language, which is still general, still just rife with opportunities for doctors to justify abortion and for patients to justify abortion. And inserting in place thereof the following words. All that's gone, and this is what's next. An abortion may be performed by a physician based upon the professional judgment of the physician. That's it. Like the previous parameters were so wide that you could sail the Titanic through it anyway. But this is just, again, carte blanche. No oversight. They're their own judge, jury, and executioner, and they can do whatever they want. All right. Now, Section 2, said Chapter 112 is hereby further amended by striking out Section 12N and a half and inserting in place thereof the following section. So what is that? No medical review process shall override the professional judgment of a treating physician and a patient or the patient's healthcare proxy to provide an abortion consistent with Section 12N. And so now we are explicitly removing medical review. So let's look. The previous Section 12N was pretty well delineated, but let's take a look at it real quick just so you can see. 12N says exactly what was in the previous portion. They just cut it all out. Here it is. And they just replaced all of that with that language we saw previously here. So, an abortion may be performed by a physician based upon professional judgment of the physician. All right. So that's it. So that's the new 12N, 12N and a half. So I keep all my tabs straight here. So what does 12N and a half say? Well, previously, so the Justia Law website here is showing us what it was before, and then we're reading the amended language in the PDF for what it is now. So the previous section said each circumstance permitting an abortion for a pregnancy that has existed, there's that 24 weeks or more under Section 12N, shall be considered independently by a treating physician and a patient or the patient's healthcare proxy. No medical review process shall override a determination by a treating physician and a patient or the patient's healthcare proxy to provide an abortion consistent with said Section 12N. Now, here's the kicker. Annually, not later than September 1st, every facility authorized to perform healthcare services under Section 12N shall submit to the Department of Public Health a written report that includes the facility's procedures and processes for providing services consistent with this section. This is oversight. This is that they have to report their reasoning. They have to be able to articulate in a way that proves. Now, we saw how broad the articulation could be. And these review boards have all of this information to do every year, so they're not going to look at every single instance. They might look at some that are flagged for whatever reason, if there's a patient complaint, if there's a lawsuit in process, something like that. But they're not typically going to flag this. Think about the number of births that occur every year in Massachusetts. There is no way that any kind of review board would be able to look at every single one unless it was flagged for errors in the treatment, or malpractice in the treatment. So this actually just says that that there's not going to be in the moment any review by an outside third party. That if the doctor says it and the patient agrees, then they can do it. But note that when we look at the update here, if I can pull it up, section, let's see. So no medical review process shall override. So everything that we looked at as far as the oversight by a committee once per year, that's gone. And now all this is there's going to be no review process. There's going to be no oversight. There's going to be no quality control. And then the last thing we'll look at, I don't mean to get too complicated here, but Section 12P of said Chapter 112, as appearing in the 2024 official edition, which is what we're looking at on that other website, is hereby amended by striking out the second paragraph. So that's the last thing we'll look at. Let's look at 12P. So this is Section 12P, striking out the section, let's see, the second paragraph, I believe is what it said. Yep, striking out the second paragraph. So the first paragraph says, except in an emergency requiring immediate action, an abortion shall not be performed under Section 12M or Section 12N unless the written informed consent of the proper person has been obtained as set forth in Section 12R. Except in an emergency requiring immediate action, an abortion shall not be performed under Section 12N unless performed in a hospital duly authorized to provide facilities for obstetrical services. Why does Planned Parenthood want this bill passed? Because it takes away this requirement that the procedure has to be performed in a hospital duly authorized for obstetrical services. Planned Parenthood loves this. All of the abortion providers other than Planned Parenthood, because it's just the biggest one, but all of them love it because it allows them to skirt any kind of oversight, any kind of quality control. And now Planned Parenthood can start profiting off of this because moms, instead of going into the hospital, maybe they don't want their OBGYN to know because they would be embarrassed because their OBGYN would not give them this advice. So they go to Planned Parenthood, where all you do is you say, I want an abortion. And Planned Parenthood doesn't look at your medical history. They don't care about your records. You sign a full release of liability. You go in and they kill your baby and that's it. They don't offer OBGYN services. They're not, many of them aren't licensed for obstetrics. Some are. But even there, the vast majority, nearly 100% of what they do is abortion. And the other part they do begrudgingly because a mom comes in and then takes advantage of some of the services that they offer that they don't really like to have to do because it costs them. So anyway, so Planned Parenthood, their business is going to increase because of this. And so it's no wonder that in this article, we have, let's see, I lost it. Let's see if we can find it again. Search mass.gov. Abortion bill. All right, there it is. So let's look at the testimonials. Where are they from? Statements of support. Director of Reproductive Equity now. So that means I want to be able to kill my baby whenever now. President and CEO of Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts. Passage of this law brings us one step closer to realizing true reproductive freedom in Massachusetts. What do you mean one step closer? What is true reproductive freedom? If this ain't it, if freely being able to abort a baby during labor is not what you want, what do you want? Like, you want to do what the Semitic peoples, the Middle Easterners back in the day that EBSCO was describing in the cult of Molech. You want to be able to kill live children. If this is only one step closer, you want to be able to kill live children. Oh, wait, they're live in the womb. So what would you want then? You want to be able to kill kids outside of the womb. What else could we infer? What level of freedom do you want? You want murder on demand of children, inside or outside of the womb. That's the only logical implication. Like if you were forming a logical argument, the only possible conclusion from a deductive argument would be that you want to be able to kill children outside of the womb. That's it. So this is horrendous. It takes a bill that was already wide open as far as allowing doctors to kill babies after 24 weeks. But now, where there were very broad, generalized expectations that at least you would try to justify it somehow. Now, instead of that, you just have, again, carte blanche. You are a law unto yourself when it comes to killing kids, and there's no oversight, there's no concern. And again, what's not stated is that you sign a medical release, and that was even in a statement of understanding of what we're going to do. There's a medical release. You have no recourse if you go through this. If they push you into this, if in a moment of pregnancy mania or whatever, it's probably going to not go over well that I said that. But if you have a moment of just poor judgment, and you decide out of fear, out of anxiety, out of whatever, that you want to kill your baby at 39 weeks, and then you go back afterwards and you say, that was horrific, this is malpractice, they didn't give me all the information, then you're helpless. You're helpless for any kind of recourse. You're helpless to get these doctors kicked out, losing their licensure, any of it. All right. So real quick, what is SLED, and how do we articulate this kind of platform for why everybody deserves legal protection? Everybody is important, whether inside the womb or outside the womb, no matter how old they are. So size is just, people will say, well, this baby's just a clump of cells. It's not even human. And then you would say, okay, well, let's take this to its logical conclusion. If because a child is young, small because of just physical, biological growth. If that child is small because it's young, very young, then therefore that makes it unworthy of the status of personhood or humanity. So we would have to say that somebody like, let's just pick a big person, Shaquille O'Neal. Somebody like Shaquille O'Neal is more human and a more valuable person than, say, any given 2-year-old child. That he has personhood in a qualitative sense that the children do not have. Therefore, they can be treated in a unjust way that Shaquille O'Neal would not be able to. Or me, for example. I'm like 5'7". I'm bigger than these little kids. Just take a 1-year-old. Am I more valuable? Like, am I more valuable than this child? Am I more valuable than this child? Same child. Did that child's value change because he got bigger? Okay, so size doesn't hold water. Personhood, humanity, value is not based on size. So how about level of development? So there again, clump of cells, not viable outside of the womb. Same thing. A child at 3 years old is prepubescent. Their brains are not fully formed yet. The male brain, I keep hearing this stat that the male brain is not fully formed until 25 years old, which is fine if that's the case. But that child is less developed than a child who's gone through puberty. So because a certain part of that child's anatomy is not as developed as an adult's anatomy post-puberty, does that mean that child is less valuable or less human less of a person deserves less legal protection than the adult. So whether the child is a single cell, whether the child is a million cells, whether the child is 10 trillion cells, it doesn't matter. Level of development does not impart personhood or humanity onto an individual. Now, the other thing is with level of development, people will say, well, the child's not viable outside of the womb. So how can you call it murder if it's a single cell? Well, that cell is alive. That cell is independent, genetically independent of mom or dad. That is a unique, individual, living human being at the earliest stage of development at one cell. And then that cell quickly begins to divide, and it divides at an exponential rate after that. And growth happens very quickly. So you think about taking something that's so small that you need a microscope to see it, and within 40 weeks, give or take, it becomes this baby, right? This, what we call baby. What happens in that time if that's not a living human being? And if that cell is dividing and that individual is growing, what must you do to stop it from growing? Cease it from growing, abort it from growing, offer it reproductive health care from growing. No, you have to kill it. Living things don't grow, or dead things don't grow. Living things continue to grow until killed. And so it takes an act of volition to kill that living human being, no matter how developed it is or undeveloped. Environment, so this is just simple, like in the womb or outside of the womb. So surgeries are done on children that are in the womb to fix these birth defects, and then the doctor opens up the woman, goes into surgery on the baby, sometimes even pulls the baby out, does the work, puts the baby back in, sews up mom's wound, and then the baby continues to develop normally. So while that baby was in the womb before the surgery, we're expected to believe that because it was in the womb, it was not human. And then when the doctor opens up the womb and pulls the baby out, now it has become human, and the doctor does the surgery on the baby. And then the doctor places it back in the womb to continue to develop in the normal gestational way, sews up the mom, and once that last stitch is done and mom's wound is closed, now that baby's not human anymore. Or let's say we have a 24-week child. Mom decides she needs to abort this baby, so she goes to Planned Parenthood and has this abortion. But the abortion fails. And the baby is born alive in the midst of the procedure. They rush the child to the ER and provide life-saving medical care. So you have a botched abortion. Was the doctor not liable for its care while it was in the womb, but then, having caused this birth through the botched abortion, now is liable for the care outside of the womb? Because the baby moved from inside to outside. It traveled, say, a foot of distance total as the crow flies from inside the womb to outside the womb. Like, how do you justify that? So if it's not size, if it's not level of development, if it's not environment, how about degree of dependency? So if the baby runs a risk to the mom's life, or if the mental health of the mom or whatever, or the mom is going to have postpartum depression, degree of dependency. Well, we're all dependent to some extent on the environment that we're in. We need oxygen, we need food, we need shelter. So we all are dependent to some degree. And that's just the least amount of dependency we can have. Let's say somebody has diabetes. So now they're dependent on all the normal things we're all dependent on, but then they also need supplemental insulin. And they can't make that supplemental insulin. They don't have a science lab. So they have to go and get it from a facility that produces insulin. And now they can take that insulin and they can survive. Because I don't need insulin, does that make me more human or more valuable? Or should I have greater legal protections than the person that needs insulin? Because they have a greater degree of dependency on something outside of themselves. They depend on that science lab because their organs aren't working properly. So just because you depend on somebody, again, make the 1-year-old comparison. A 1-year-old will die very quickly without constant care from mom. Just like a baby in the womb would die very quickly if cut off from mom's provision. So through the umbilical cord, again, food, oxygen, shelter. Same thing. So mom is supposedly legally liable for the care of that child, because when parents don't care for their children, that's called neglect. And especially if a child is neglected to death, then that's murder. So, how is it that the degree of dependency of a child, just because it's in the womb, doesn't matter? Like, that child is dependent in the same way we're dependent, every single one of us. And yet, because that child is in this particular dependency situation, therefore we can kill it. Well, I think that that's medical malfeasance, it's negligence from the doctor, and it's quite frankly negligence from parents who would abort their children as well. So, for anybody who wants to detract from all this, you're welcome to make a comment, and I'll try to pay attention, follow up with you maybe, but yeah, just seeing the vitriol from the pro-abortion folks, for anybody who would dare speak against this. It's just a lucky thing that they were allowed to be born, and that we don't apply the same metrics for human value to them that we apply to these children in the womb, because then it would definitely be just a murder free for all. So we're taking the most vulnerable among us. We're making them political pawns. We're making them into inhuman animals, basically, because they're animated, they're alive, but they're not human, they're not persons in their opinion. So it's despicable. So the mass abortion bill passed, and the gleeful stares of all of the folks there, they probably would have been sitting here banging drums and playing flutes and trying to console those poor parents who placed their children into the furnace of the giant statue of Molech and listened as it was burned alive, the screams of the innocent going unresponded to. So, all right, well, hope everybody has a great week, and I hope this was useful. And again, if you have any comments, feel free to leave them. God bless.